Excellent.
TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, welcome to the New York Parrot Literary Corner. I am Dustin, your anchor and host. Dustin Pickering, that is. You know me very well. This is the only and best show offering a global platform to artists and creative minds. Please subscribe. And today we have Jerena Tobiasen, who is a Canadian writer currently residing on the west coast of British Columbia. After retiring, she began writing a story inspired in part by events that began to unfold in the early 1990s and had haunted her ever since. Her work morphed into The Prophecy, which is a 3-book saga including The Crest, The Emerald, and The Destiny. The Crest and The Emerald are also available in audiobook format. In 2020, The Prophecy won a Canadian Book Award, the Independent Press Award Distinguished Favorite Historical Fiction Series, and the Next Generation Indie Book Award Fiction Series finalist. The Destiny is also a Reader's Favorite Bronze Medal winner. Jerena enhances her writing, thirst for knowledge, and understanding of history by traveling to foreign lands, visiting museums and libraries, conducting interviews, and walking in the footsteps of her characters. Jerena enjoys writing historical fiction, bringing to life characters who inhabited our world well before us. She also writes more contemporary short stories and poetry about her travels, personal experiences, including how she met her now husband in the middle of a dance floor, and other topics inspired by her imagination. A collection of her short stories and other writings can be found on her website. She is also a proud member of the Writers' Union of Canada, the Canadian Authors Association, the Federation of BC Writers, the Royal City Literary Arts Society, and the Royal Canadian Legion. Thanks for joining us today, Jerena. I hope you're doing okay.
Thank you very much for inviting me to participate on your program, and I'm very fine. If I may, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that today I'm joining you from the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Hunkomina and the Squamish speaking peoples.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. What is that? Where are you exactly?
I'm actually in my home, but in Canada, we recognize the lands of the Indigenous people as being the first people. And so it's just a point of recognition when we acknowledge that we're not only in our homes, but we are also on their lands.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were traveling, that's part of what you do. I wasn't sure where you were exactly, but that's wonderful. I'm really glad that that acknowledgement is taking place. And by the way, we're celebrating our 100th show today, our 100th episode. I don't know if you're aware of that. So
I saw that.
Yes, and it's wonderful to have this many episodes behind us, and we have many more to go in the future. So getting into thank you so much. And getting into the nitty-gritty of your writing. So and you say in your bio, there's some backstory to the prophecy. So I'm wondering if you could give us a little info on that backstory or what inspired the trilogy.
I'm happy to. The story sort of seeded itself in the mid 1980s when actually it was early 1990s, pardon me, I work in all sorts of decades. It started in the 1990s, and it happened because my friend's then wife kidnapped their son. And it became an international situation because first it took them to the Netherlands, and then it ended up in Canada. And because I'm here and he is in Germany, he asked for my help. So I did what I could to help him, which isn't much when he's there and I'm here, but I was closer to his child. And it's just such any kidnapping is a horrific event for any parent. I fortunately have never experienced it myself, but through him, I understand the experience. And it didn't just end there. He never did get his son back, but it's what unfolded through the years, and how he eventually had an opportunity to speak with his son, and where his son is now, and that sort of thing. But of course, I can't write that in the story. I have to make it a story, and I have to be careful how I write the story, so I don't breach anyone's privacy or get myself into trouble.
Right.
So when I retired, I always thought all those years, somebody should make a movie or write a book about this. It's so unbelievable what happened. And I did. I retired, and a few weeks later, I just started writing, and out it came.
Wow. So how long did it take you roughly to compose the trilogy? And I'm curious, just like, book by book. I mean, obviously you would probably write the first one and maybe take a break, or did you just get it all out and just separate it into a trilogy, or how did you do that?
No, actually, if you think that I've been living the story for 30 years, so it was there. And so when I started to write it, I realized that in order for the reader to understand my characters, I would have to give them some backstory. And the more I dug into the backstory, the more detailed it became. And then finally, I reached a point after 2 months where I said to my husband, I think we need to go traveling. And as a matter of fact, the view of this lovely lake behind me comes from the second book. It actually is featured in the second book. And so we went traveling, and when I came back, I rewrote the story by enhancing it with my experiences. I like to use the 5 senses. What did I see? What did I feel? What was the weather like? That sort of thing. And when I had it written to a point where I needed an editor, I think it was about 700 pages. And the editor, after reading the story, said, nobody's going to buy a 700-page book anymore. You need to break it. Can you break it? And I said, sure, I can break it in 3. So I wrote the first story, which is about the history of the protagonist's family, and up to the point that it's just about time for him to appear. And then I wrote the second book, which is her history. And then we get into the third book, and that's where the two of them ultimately meet. But I wrote it in such a way that you can read any one of the books first. It doesn't matter. And so if you read the third one, you could hopefully be interested enough to find out what was the beginning of all of this and go back and read the other books.
That's an interesting method there. You developed to let people pick any of the books, and then they get all interested into the others. That's right. And the other part of the answer to your question is, while it took me 2 months to write the story, it took me another maybe 1.5 years to work with the editors and the proofreaders and get the book work done and all that stuff. And so obviously this is like a thing that took place over, like what, 10, 15, 20 years, and you wrote it out in a couple of months, and then a year later it's out on the market, and that's in and of itself a historical fiction novel. So I'm curious, what draws you to this genre of historical fiction? What is it about it that excites you? Well, interestingly enough, it's not typically a genre that I would read. Well, actually, I'm telling a fib there. I would read more historical fiction going back beyond the 20th century. But
I ended up where I landed simply because I was starting the story in about 1990. And so when you go back in time to add parents and grandparents, you just end up there.
Mhm.
So it starts, the soldier story, the first book starts in 1914. And this young man is about to go off to war. And then it goes through, I call it the in-between time between the two wars, and in through the Second World War. And then ultimately it ends up in this more modern kidnapping circumstance.
Interesting. So do you have a long-term interest in World War history, or is there anything that it's something about it that speaks to you, or is that just how the circumstances of developing this particular book came about?
Well, there's two aspects to it, I guess. That from a personal perspective, I've always had an interest. My uncles were in the war. My dad was too young, but my uncles were definitely in World War II. And one served overseas in Normandy, and the other one actually stayed in Canada and taught pilots to fly. So I've always had that interest of what did they do in the war, sort of thing. And my father's lament that he was on the train heading to boot camp when the war was declared over, so he never had his experience. And then to be able to write the backstory of my friend's family, some of which is true. I interviewed his parents, and I was able to work that into the end of the first book, the crest. And the crest is their family crest, indeed. And so going back that far to 1914, I had to know what I was talking about or do the best I could. And so I ended up doing an awful lot of research. And I did the best I could, and I apologize to anyone if I got anything wrong. But
We're human, it happens.
it is. And, sometimes the timing just doesn't work, the story versus the real history. So you have to I hope your readers are willing to take that leap of faith with you and see the story through. And the other challenge is just making it a believable experience all round for the reader. If there's something I've written and they didn't know, I hope that they'll look it up and learn more.
Right. Get into it, get it tantalize a little bit, get people interested in the subject. Absolutely. So in your own writing and in your own research and studying in the background and reading and hearing stories from family, how do you feel about how does this story relate to human nature for you, and what does it reveal to you about what people are capable of?
Well, again, two sides to it. The first is that in writing about the two wars and my characters' experiences through the wars, the first book is the experience of a German family, their experience during the war. And it's different than I think one of my reviewers even wrote, I have never considered that. I've never considered what would be involved from their perspective. And they were, human beings. They were a family. They were drawn into two wars. The first one, maybe it wasn't so difficult because at that point it was the Kaiser's war and the Kaiser's army, and they were fighting for their country. But by the time you get through the tough years between the two wars and into the Second World War, they don't want to fight. The last thing they want to do is be involved in another war. And the only reason they did was because their family was threatened. if my friend's father, he was just, I think he was 19 or 20 or something like that. And he was told that if he didn't enlist in the war and participate wholeheartedly, then his family would be put into a camp.
Mhm.
So what do you do? You know?
Right. It's sort of a lose-lose. I mean, it's either do what they're told or, lose every, see your family miserable. And that is definitely a dilemma for somebody. And I think people don't take that into account when they think about, the goings on of under Hitler and under the circumstances there. It's frightening. It's really frightening that we all could be in that circumstance. I mean, it's just terrible. But that's interesting insight. And did you find it difficult to maybe sympathize with this character?
Not at all.
Wow.
Not at all, because I've been there. I
Mhm.
know them. I know their story, and I understand it exactly. So it wasn't difficult to write at all.
Hmm.
The harder story to write was the second book, because I don't know anything about Roma people, how they live, except what we read on the internet or in the news or whatever. And I really had to delve into that to get a better understanding of how that families could experience the same situation.
Mhm.
What it was like to be on the run, what it was like to try and save yourself from what are they? I can't remember the term that was used, but the people that Hitler didn't think were worthy of living,
Mhm.
and
Right.
how to get them out of the country to a safe place. And what would that look like? And so I had to create my own civilization or community, I guess,
Mhm.
in order to make that one work. But there's still the odd bits of truth in it as well. It's more my story than the first one is, but there's
Hmm.
still some stuff in there that's true. The third book is a very different situation, because now I'm having to write about a woman who is not of the best, she's not one of the best mothers that I would ever want to know. And for it to really discover and understand her reasoning for kidnapping this boy from a really good lifestyle, and why she would think that way, why she would deny him that opportunity, and completely deny him that opportunity by running off to another country and living in a secret place. So that one was a difficult one too, but I had to do it. I couldn't make you understand her as a reader if I couldn't understand her myself.
Wow. So it's like, developing the complexities of motivation and situation and how they intertwine. You find that you exploring a ground that you're not as I don't know, say maybe comfortable with is something that writing this trilogy is puts you in that situation. So that's fascinating. How fiction can just carry you into so many different lands. So
Exactly.
yeah, I'm curious about you've been nominated and also been won numerous awards and so apparently this has drawn a lot of interest for people. How did you get the work out there? What kind of marketing strategies did you find were effective in bringing the book to people's hands effectively?
Well, I can't remember if we said it anywhere, but I am an independent publisher. So I
Mhm.
did the work not by myself, but with the aid of a fantastic crew of people who really knew what they were doing. And once we got the book up and out, well, it's an ebook, a print book, and an audio book. So the services that distribute those are the first point of access, I guess. But I do, I have a Facebook page, and I post about my travels and my writing. It's been a little bit quiet in the last few months, simply because I'm writing a new series. And it takes a lot of research and downtime in order to create these new communities and worlds that I'm writing
Mhm.
about. I also have a website, and I have posted some of my short stories there, and there's a collection of
Mhm.
them. Some of them are personal, some of them are about my travels. Some of them I just, they're whimsical. And so there's those two, and then I have a publicist, and we work on Goodreads, um, interviews. Gosh, there's just so many different sites. I think one is called BookBub, and there's any number. I think there's 40 distributors for audiobooks, and so we're always putting plugs out there somewhere.
It's a lot of work then. It really is.
It
To
is.
promote a book, I think sometimes some people say that what the writing is the fun part, the marketing becomes the really tedious and and more tricky part of the situation for a writer. And a lot of writers really don't know how to market their work very well, and so it kind of falls into the cracks. You may be good writing, and it doesn't get out there because they don't know how to get it into the crowd, get people reading it and talking about it. That's
That's
why
exactly
I ask stuff like that for a lot of people. It's something that a lot of writers could benefit from, I think, is hearing the different ways you market and think about it, getting the work out.
That's exactly right, and that's why I engaged this service that helps me put my books together, and why I have a publicist, because I work with her. I work very hard with her, but without her guidance, I don't think I could have done it.
Right. So do you find that the situation with COVID has affected sales or affected your specific marketing strategies at all?
Certainly affected marketing strategies, because I was I was just working on a campaign to go out to bookstores and do readings and that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, and I was signed up to do, it was a variety show for, oh, I can't remember the fund at the moment. It might have been the Cancer Society or something. And they do a variety show. And so I always go and read
Mhm.
for them. Um, and then all of a sudden we couldn't do it. It was scheduled last March and we couldn't do it. So the organizers were quick enough to put together a program sort of like this. They did a Zoom program. And those of us who weren't requiring a huge stage to perform were invited to do our presentation. So I did do my last, I think that was my last public reading, was
Hmm.
for that program. And since then, I have attended a lot of Zoom programs, but it's not the same. And I launched my first book at the end of, at the beginning of 2019, but the other two have not been formally launched. I was traveling, I think I was in Israel when the third one came out, and I might have been in France when the second one came out. I can't remember, but I was traveling for to collect data for the series I'm writing now.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm missing the bookstores and the reading
Absolutely.
opportunities.
Mm.
Yeah.
Being face to face with readers, talking with them in person, and getting to know people. Yeah, it's tough times, but we'll make it through. I think we'll resurface with much strength, I think, in the future. So I mean, I don't know if you have any, like, a short piece of short fiction to read, or like maybe a couple of paragraphs from your book that you would like to share with us as viewers and our audience, get a kind of idea of what your work is about.
I have a few things. How long would you like me to read for?
I think we can do with, like, 3 to 5 minutes, maybe. That
Okay.
work?
I have a short story here that I actually published in the in the Royal City Literary Arts e-magazine last October for Halloween. It's a fun story. It's called The Gardener's Mistress.
Oh, yes. I remember this one.
Engaged as a sub-gardener at the age of 14, Victor Fife had worked his entire life in servitude to the estate of the late Earl of Carrick. After 86 years, he stood alone in the empty greenhouse attached to the garden in which the castle's vegetables and herbs had been grown. Empty, but for one ancient plant, imported from the Americas a month before it had been assigned to him as its sole caregiver. It was so small that the pot in which it had been rooted fit snugly in his young hands. Through his rheumy eyes, Victor scanned the empty greenhouse, remembering the grandeur, pardon me, first revealed to him. A myriad of exotic flora bearing unique blossoms and fruit like banana vines, tomato plants, pawpaw trees, cucumbers, pumpkins, and other gourd vines, the beauty and marvel of which he could not have imagined, but for his fortunate employment. Some plants did not bear fruit. Instead, they bore beautiful, often fragrant, and always colorful blooms, including small monkey face orchids from Peru and the putrid smelling plant nicknamed the corpse. Fortunately, he thought, that one had rarely bloomed. With trembling hands, he raised a cup as small as the pot with which he had first been blessed and drank deeply of the clear, tasteless liquid. It was the Earl's wife who had driven the acquisition of the unusual plants. She preferred the pastime. She had borne the Earl the required number of children then abandoned them to the care of a nursemaid. She had refused any form of needlework or other tasks expected of genteel women. Victor Fife had often overheard her muttering that gardening was her passion. Indeed, that passion had been obvious. On the occasion of each new acquisition for her greenhouse, the Lady of Carrick had engaged a child from the village as its caregiver. Each engagement had been for the lifetime of the plant, thereby ensuring guaranteed employment so long as the child took care to be successful. Some children had lasted only a matter of weeks or months, forced to return to their families in tears and shame for having caused the demise of one of the estate's priceless plants. I won't be one to return in tears, Victor had declared confidently, as he had set off all those years before, and indeed he had not. After 86 years, he had outlived them all, even the lady who had acquired his curious plant and engaged him as its tender. Victor sighed and stroked the edge of the silky bloom affectionately. I have lived 100 years, he said hoarsely. My bones creak, my plumbing is faulty, my teeth have rotted. It won't be long before my beating heart ceases. Then what shall become of you, my love? His trembling hand reached to stroke another bloom. Tears escaped his near-blind eyes. He felt the need for sleep overwhelm him. We are both old, my friend, he said wearily, and we have lived well. You have grown in size and stature all these years because I have loved and tended you well, so well that you shall outlive me, only for a short time. Alas, this one last meal will be the death of you too. With that final statement, Victor shed his clothes and climbed onto the cushiony pillows of his beloved Bloom. His devotion had cost him both wife and family, but his pride had brought the estate honors and awards beyond anything his employer had ever imagined. He tickled the fringe of the hairs as delicate as eyelashes and felt the cushions rise to embrace him. He tickled them again and felt the gentle pressure cocoon him as a lover never had. He wriggled a few more times, seeking a comfortable position. As his mind drifted on the opium cloud, He felt his lover's sticky juices squirt over him like saliva. Soon, he thought, soon you shall release me of my obligations and my loneliness. Soon. Some weeks later, a gardener from a neighboring estate opened the greenhouse door, calling Victor Fife's name. When Victor failed to answer, the neighbor stepped into the massive empty building that had once seen such splendor, only to find the old man's prized Venus flytrap in its last throes of death. Next to it sat a neat pile of Victor's clothing.
Very bizarre, kind of morbid story, but it's very nice. You can have a beautiful story that's also a little on the dark side, and it's almost funny because you don't really know exactly, you don't really tell them exactly what just happened. You let the imagination sort of invent something. Quite a story,
That's
though.
right.
I really enjoyed that one. What inspired that? Was there a moment where you're just walking down the road and suddenly I want to write a story about this, or did it just kind of evolve out of your writing? Just sat down and wrote something out, and it evolved out of that, or?
Yeah, it really just came to mind. The request for the October issue was for something creepy for Halloween.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to write about ghosts and whatnot, but I had just written a scene, and I think this is what drew me to it. I had just written a scene in my current manuscript about a greenhouse that contained exotic plants from all over the world. And I started wondering what kind of plants would be creepy for Halloween, and it just kind of morphed from there.
Okay, so it was a themed call for submissions, and you kind of bent the rules a little bit and invented your own story around something, morbid plant story. Those are always great.
Well,
Well,
I'm
thank you
glad
for.
that it left you with something to think about at
Yeah,
the
you're not
end.
quite sure what's going on at the end. You just think about. I mean, for all we know, he could have just gotten tired and took off or something and left his clothes behind him. We don't know. I mean, we can assume the worst, though, and that's how our imagination plays it out, I guess. But
It's
thank you for sharing that. It was a really interesting story.
great. You're welcome. It was my pleasure to read it.
So we have about a remaining minute or so for you, if you want to give some kind of impart some sort of words of advice for our viewers or for future people reading, watching the program on YouTube. Anything you want to say to them?
Well, I would say to readers who might be interested in reading my stories, that I hope that you'll give me that leap of faith and trust that I did my best to write the historical story as best I could and capture the development of the kidnapping as best I could. And to people who are just starting out writing or maybe struggling with their writing, I see this an awful lot on the writers group pages that I belong to, where someone says, I can't get started. I don't know, should I map out my story first and draw an outline, or what should I do? And my suggestion is just write from your heart, write what your passion is, and then worry about making it look pretty. I'm a pantser myself.
Excellent words. I think those are great things to leave our audience with, and fellow writers out there and creative minds. Just get started with it. Get your passion out there in the story. Let it evolve. Let it happen. So thank you again for joining us today, Jerena. It's been wonderful talking with you, and good luck with your book. And this is our 100th day of this program, and so we're going to celebrate that a little bit later with a special program. So I hope everyone out there will join us and subscribe to our channel, please. If we're looking for 1 million subscribers, just get out there and tell everybody that we exist and that we're looking for poets, writers, creative minds, artists, absolutely anybody out there who needs a platform to discuss their works and their creative mind, get in touch with us at literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. And we have ability to donate. If anybody would like to donate, we are at paypal.me/nyparrot. That is paypal.me/nyparrot. If you look at the down below on the screen on the YouTube, there will be the exact link will be there. So thank you again, Jerena, for joining us. Thanks to all our viewers. And once again, join us this evening for our special 100th celebration for our episode. So thank you again. And this has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering. And keep the faith, keep writing, everybody. Keep it up. Thanks a lot.